Hello, guys, and welcome to day 11 of our star biology review. Today, we'll be covering Punnett squares. Specifically, we're looking at how we can use your genetic information to figure out the outcomes and predict what the traits will be for an organism. Some words that you're going to see today are going to be called monohybrid and dihybrid crosses, incomplete dominance, codominance, sex-linked traits, and multiple alleles. Before we move in there, recall with Punnett squares with genetics, we were taking the letters, the genotypes of organisms, and trying to predict what the offspring of two parents could look like. So, pause on this screen on page 14 of your packets, your review booklets. Please copy down the following definitions. Pause now. So, with your definitions, let's understand a few keywords that we need to know for genetics. The first one is understanding the difference between a gene and an allele. A gene is a small section of your chromosome that is like the instruction manual for one certain trait. For example, in this slide right here, this entire structure is a chromosome. But the gene is just one section of that chromosome. So these genes, clear this off. So these genes are going to code for one specific trait. Now, the thing about our traits is that when we inherit your genes, our chromosomes from our parents, we're inheriting different versions, and those versions are called alleles. So this is like basically saying version 1 of this gene and version 2. Now, these alleles can be different from each other. For example, allele 1, let's say, came from mom, and it's green, so this version is green. And allele 2 came from dad, and this version is purple. So the genes are the same gene. They're the same section of DNA from both mom and dad, but the versions, the alleles are different from mom and dad. Now, what do we get from mom and dad? What are the alleles? How do we represent alleles? We represent alleles as a genotype. A genotype is how we represent alleles. All right. So, a genotype are the letters that we inherit from mom and dad. One letter from each parent. Now, those letters can be identical to each other, in which case we call them homozygous. For example, two capital letter B's, two lowercase b's. They are the same type, same version. And those versions are called alleles. Or maybe mom and dad gave you a different version, which we call heterozygous. And heterozygous is represented by two different versions of an allele. So if we look at these examples on the right side, homozygous genotypes mean both versions are the same. Heterozygous means both versions of the letters are different. And here's another homozygous. Here is the same. Now, we saw that example that two letters can be the same version or they can be different versions. But what are those versions actually called? So those versions are what we call dominant or recessive. These are different versions. Now, when we see the word dominant, this word dominant, we should think of the word strong. These genes are going to be genes that were going to basically be enough to take over the appearance of a trait. For example, if we look at this capital B, if a pair of letters contains at least one capital B, they are going to show the dominant trait for an organism. In this case, dominant being brown. So all these genotypes with a dominant B contain the dominant trait. Now, the second type of allele that can exist is called a recessive allele. This is like a weaker version. And when I say strong or weak, I don't mean someone with blue eyes is weaker than someone with brown eyes. I mean that the strength of their gene to take over the appearance is weaker. So in this case, someone with blue eyes can only have two recessive alleles because the dominant allele will take over the appearance otherwise. Now, something you're going to see us talk about today is this phrase called expressing traits. Traits are expressed. When we talk about expressing traits, we mean that they are going to be shown. Just like we say, express your feelings, express yourself, we are talking about show your feelings, show your true colors. So, what are we showing though? What are we expressing? Based on the letters that you inherit, the genotype, you can then show a phenotype. A phenotype is what we see. For example, in the case of this flower, this plant, the height, tall or short, are the phenotypes. Now, what will make them tall or short is going to be determined by their genotypes. So, genotypes influence phenotypes. All right, on page 15 now, I'm going to show it here. Page 15, we have a Punnett square problem. So, here we're asked to complete the Punnett square. Remember, with all Punnett squares, one letter comes down from the top and one letter goes in from the side for each box. Now, from here, we need to determine what are the probability that an offspring will look a certain way. Remember this term dominant. This term dominant means capital. So dominant, dominant. So they want to know what percentage of offspring will have a dominant trait. So we need to count how many boxes have at least one dominant allele. Remember that each box erase that. Each box represents a 25% chance of happening. So, here are my letters again. I see that 4 out of 4 boxes have dominant R. So we say that is 100%. Number 2 says, what would the genotype big R, little r, dominant R, recessive R be considered homozygous or heterozygous? Remember, Hetero means different. So we would say big R, little r would be heterozygous. Here's a practice problem now. Achondroplasia is an inherited condition that affects the formation of bone in humans. The allele for achondroplasia is capital A is dominant to the unaffected allele lowercase a. So they're saying that achondroplasia is dominant. And if you don't have it, you're recessive. How do I know it's recessive? Because they're saying unaffected is using a lowercase a, lowercase letters are recessive. If a person who is homozygous dominant has children with a person who is homozygous recessive, what percentage of children will likely have achondroplasia? This question is asking you to remember two words here: homozygous and homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive. Homozygous means same, dominant means capital. So we have a same capital. Homozygous means same, recessive means lowercase. So two lowercase. So these boxes will now cross. And we are looking for the chance of a child having achondroplasia. We are told that achondroplasia is dominant. Again, achondroplasia is dominant. So if there is a capital letter, 4 out of 4, that is going to give us 100% chance. All right, now on page 15, look at the ABO blood type and incomplete squares. So for the ABO blood type, we are going to fill out this box right here. Copy that right in here. So we see an example of blood typing. Remember, in blood types, there are 3 or 4 different phenotypes you can be. You can be type A, type B, type AB, and O. Blood type is an example of codominance because both the A and B are dominant. So if there's an example like here where a child inherits a dominant A and a dominant B from a parent, then that means a child can actually show equal AB blood type. Remember that O is the recessive blood type here. So if there's a dominant A with an O, like for say here, the A is gonna be what's expressed. Same on the fourth box, B is going to be expressed over the O. All right, now for incomplete dominance. We are going to be doing this box now. Incomplete dominance is where one dominant allele does not fully take over in recessive. There is a mix of traits. So in this case, dominant R and dominant R, homozygous dominant flower, crosses with a homozygous recessive flower. The result is going to be, instead of the dominant red R flower taking over and all of the flowers being red, instead the red and white colors will mix, producing a pink color. All right, number 51. Here's a question from our STAR test. Normal fruit flies have brownish yellow bodies, and this body color is dominant. A mutation in the gene for body color can produce flies with the ebony body color. A homozygous normal fruit fly, EE, is crossed with the homozygous ebony fruit fly, little e, little e. What is the predicted outcome of this cross? So we're told that having normal fruit flies, so normal color here, is dominant. Whereas ebony would be recessive. So if I were to use letters for this, I would say here they say E plus is going to be dominant. Little e by itself is recessive. If we were to do a cross, we're going to have E plus cross with E, E. So here's our E plus E, E plus E. Pretend these are boxes here. So taking a homozygous dominant fruit fly, mixing it with a homozygous recessive fruit fly, should show that each potential offspring has a chance of containing that dominant allele, meaning that all of the offspring will have the normal trait. One thing that we are going to mention just briefly is this word called karyotypes. A karyotype is just a way that we can show what your chromosomes actually look like. Now, karyotypes are basically just us grouping together chromosomes from mom and dad that are similar in size. Now, karyotypes allow us to see genetic mutations, chromosomal mutations, where, for example, right here, there's an extra chromosome in the 21st pair. Right over here, we have an example of the X and Y chromosomes. This means this person will be a male. Remember that every human has 23 pairs of chromosomes. 22 of them are used just to control your body. One of them is used for your sex. And our final slide of today, this is a dihybrid problem. And dihybrid problems occur when we are talking about two traits at the same time. So what are the odds that someone can inherit two traits at the same time? So we are told that there is a curly hair trait. I'm going to highlight these. So we have curly hair and straight hair. And then we have this ability to taste this thing called PTC and not be able to taste it. If you remember, we did this PTC paper in class. So we are told that if both parents are heterozygous for both traits, what would the genotype of the offspring be? This one's asking you to remember what heterozygous means. Heterozygous, as we should remember, hetero equals different. So heterozygous for hair would be two different versions of the letter. Heterozygous for taste would be two different versions of the letter. So here we are looking for answer choice A. Okay guys, now you can go ahead and complete your day 11 activity in Schoology. This activity is a little bit different. I'm going to kind of give you an example of what we're doing. For this one, you guys are going to be, apologies, you guys are going to be doing a Punnett square problem where you're going to read each problem. So notice there's 1, 2. Whatever you decide, you're going to type into the gray boxes. So just type in there whatever do you think the answer is. If you get all these answers right, they will turn green. If you do not get something right, it will not turn green. All right, guys. So that's going to be it for our lesson today. Go ahead, do your activity, and good luck.